Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's session on local resources. We are really happy to welcome you to, what is it now, the third in our series with the New England affiliates of National History Day. And delighted to have you with us and to learn a little bit about using local resources. My name is Rebecca Tabor. I'm the state coordinator for Connecticut History Day, and behind me you'll see our lovely Connecticut's Old State House where we're located. And I'm delighted to be joined by some of my other New England colleagues, Victoria Hughes from Vermont, who is co-hosting with me, and Kate Melcher from Massachusetts, and John Taylor from Maine. And we're really excited to be able to share with you some materials and sources for doing local topics, because I think all of us would unanimously agree that we really encourage you to explore local topics and local stories, because they often are really rich in exploration. So, and I should mention that we are recording today's program, and we will be sharing that with you later. So those of you in the audience who have not are coming in late, or perhaps joining us, not able to join us live, you'll be able to still enjoy what we've shared. So I think without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. Let me just get this to start with the there we go. So exploring local history. Today's program, what we're going to be doing is offering a few general thoughts about why exploring local history is a good idea. We're going to have a chance, and I'll start off with that. Then we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about the Chronicling American History project here in Connecticut. And we've got a colleague from the from Connecticut's State Library to share information about that project and some of the resources. And then Victoria is going to talk a little bit about resources at the Vermont Historical Society. And then our colleagues from Massachusetts and Maine are going to share some resources that are available through their organizations and contacts. So why should you choose a local topic? You know, a lot of times students, when they are faced with the annual theme, revert to topics that are well known or that they find in their textbook. And those are perfectly fine to explore. But why would you think about looking at a local resource? Well, first of all, a local topic is oftentimes easier to research. You've got, except for Maine, I would say that all of our states are pretty tiny. And here in Connecticut, you can traverse our state in about 2 hours. So there are a lot of great resources that you can get to and get to quickly. I will say, as the state coordinator here in Connecticut, I often get these really excited texts or emails or calls who will tell me, oh, Rebecca, we had History Day students today doing research at our museum. And there are a lot of people eager to help students do great local research. There are a lot of resources. Here in Connecticut, we have 169 towns, and just about every single town has a historical society. You've got a lot of people with a lot of knowledge, and you get to learn something new about your state. You know, I think a lot of times, and again, speaking for Connecticut, we often feel that we're the state that's in between Boston and New York City. And oh, we're just a pass through. But there are a lot of cool things happened here in Connecticut, and a lot of cool things happened in other parts of New England. And so it's a great chance to learn something new about your state. And it happened here. Anything you're studying about at the national level, you can find locally. So for instance, one of our perennial favorites that we see every year at a national contest or at local level is the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, right, friends? We have seen that show up time and time again. Here in Connecticut, we had the Hartford Circus Fire. So if you really like disasters, you can find a local one. And so that's kind of, you know, you're interested in the civil rights movements. We had protests here in Hartford. You know, there are a lot of things that you can find locally. And so why do you want to do local history. A local topic shows how your state is connected to the wider world. The Revolutionary War, things happened here in Connecticut. We think it all happened in Massachusetts. I'm sorry, Kate, to tell you that actually things happened here. The meeting of General Count Rochambeau, I thought you'd appreciate that. The meeting of Count Rochambeau and George Washington, their first meeting of the French-American alliance happened here in the grounds of where I work. So any national topic, as I said, can be found locally. So if there's something you're interested in, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, there are things that you can look for locally. You can connect to international topics. Sometimes I'll meet with teachers and they'll say, well, I teach world history. What can kids do in History Day? They can find a topic, and sometimes you'll have, and I'm kind of thinking of you, John, with the work that Margaret Chase Smith did, that can be connected not just nationally, but internationally. Here in Connecticut, you might have seen that President Biden recently visited the Dodd Center for Human Rights at UConn. Well, the Dodd Center was founded because Senator Dodd, before he, and I should say the first Senator Dodd, there were two, but he was actually a prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials after World War II. So again, it's a local institute you can get to, but it has an international topic. And one of the things that's really important, I think there's been a lot of discussion, there currently is a lot of discussion about civics education. And National History Day, I think, has such a close and important tie to civics, because exploring local topics help students develop a sense of civic pride. You love the place you know. And so studying local history helps provide context for some of the issues we face today. And it helps get people to care about the place where they live. There's a lot of great history that you walk by that you don't know about each and every day. And again, not to beat a dead horse, but there are great sources and they're easy to access. Some of the unanticipated benefits of History Day, and I say this, and I have to say, now we're getting to be the team, the experienced team. John and Victoria and I have been around for a long time. Kate is a little newer, but still has started to be around for a while. So we've seen this happen year after year. And one of the things I love about National History Day and sometimes exploring local topics is the fact that it starts family conversations, and it starts sometimes with family history of learning about what a family member was involved with. They were involved in a war, they had a connection to something, and also the whole process of doing a project as the family is driving around. We've heard this from a lot of folks, and how families view the place where they live. Doing a History Day project isn't just the student doing it, it's the parent who's driving, it's the parent who's hearing and exploring it. The other thing I just wanted to push a little bit for any of our audience members who are at a historical society or a museum or an archive is that one of the great things about History Day is that it sometimes can create a relationship between a school and a historical organization, because many of us in museums know that when they're in third and fourth grade, we go to museums, we visit in non-COVID years. But it's that middle and high school age group that's so much harder to get in the door, because it's harder to get them out of the classroom. But History Day allows for some kind of relationship. In Connecticut, we survey our colleagues at museums and historical societies and archives, and we ask them, what are some good topic ideas for this coming year? And we share that because we want to get students out doing research at museums and at local organizations. But it also sometimes will lead to opportunities for students to present their work, whether or not they make states, whether or not they make nationals. We had a couple of students a couple of years ago who did a project on Miss Carolyn Faraday, who she helped get recognition for women who were tested on during World War II. They were called the Ravensbrück lapans or rabbits because of the testing that happened on them. They hopped because of some of the physical abuse that they experienced. But the Bellamy Faraday Museum in Bethlehem, Connecticut, actually had on display the students' work in their visitor center. They had one of the students who did a performance, do a performance at an event. So sometimes it's a great opportunity for the student to get recognition. And I'm just going to share a real life example, which is one of my all-time favorites. So this is, you know, I'm one of the experience coordinators now. So this is back in 2016. And pictured is Tim Cohn with his great aunt May, who actually lived with his family. And this is what Tim wrote. And I should mention, he did place in the top 3 that year. My Radium Girls project was my tribute to May. She was so proud of my exhibit. Her story was so unique, but very few people knew about the suffering that the Radium Girls endured. I wanted to share her memories with the public. Her story was too precious to keep them just between us. And for those who don't know what is a Radium Girl, in Waterbury, Connecticut, there was a Waterbury Clock Company. This happened in other parts of the country, including New Jersey. But to meet the increased demand for watches after World War I, women lip dip, putting paint brushes into their mouths, and then dipped it into radium-laced paint to paint the dials and numbers on watches. May Kane was the last living Waterbury, Connecticut Radium Girl. She would say that she, the reason she survived is she was lazy, and so she was moved to a different job and only lasted in the lip dipping painting for a few months. But she still faced numerous battles with cancer, lost all of her teeth by age 30. But she, because probably she was only employed for a few months, she lived to the age of 107, dying in 2014. So there is a local story, and this is what I mean about sharing family history, that sometimes a family member has been involved in something that is linked to a really interesting topic. And Tim held on to this topic because he did History Day 6 or 7 years, and he held on to this topic for a long time until it was the right theme. And so I'm going to kind of breeze through this part very quickly. I mentioned that each year we create a National History Day, a list of Connecticut topics related to the annual National History Day theme. All of these are hyperlinked, and we're going to send out a PDF of this presentation, so you can just click on it. And we also work with partners here in Connecticut who do their own History Day lists. The Connecticut Humanities, ConnecticutHistoryDay.org website, they do a whole article about topics that relate. Connecticut Explored, which is the magazine of Connecticut history, has a link of topics that you can explore using their journal. And actually, I should say, it's not really a journal, it's a magazine. It's a glossy magazine, which is easy for younger scholars to access. There is the Connecticut History Journal, which is more an academic journal. And then something that's kind of fun to look at for topic ideas is the state historian has a daily posting of today in Connecticut history, big things happened in this state on this date. And there are a lot of local resources available, as we've talked about: libraries, museums, archives, historical societies, colleges and universities, and people. And if you have a topic you're having trouble finding a museum that would be appropriate, contact the folks at Connecticut League of History Organizations, because they often are very helpful. And with that, I probably went on longer than I should have, as I want to do, because I really passionately believe in using local resources, because we've seen some great topics. It's now my pleasure to introduce my colleague here in Connecticut, Nicole Beskier, who is the project coordinator for the Connecticut Digital Newspaper Project out of the Connecticut State Library. She is a certified archivist and has worked in libraries and archives for over 10 years. She's worked with a number of types of collections, including corporate archives, local history collections, personal papers, and religious collections. She holds a Master of Science in Library and Information Science from Simmons University and a Master's of Heritage Preservation from Georgia State University. So it's my pleasure and I'm delighted to be able to welcome you, Nicole, to speak with our audience.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. So let me share my screen really quickly. All right, and just let me know if things aren't looking good. So, as Rebecca mentioned, I am the project coordinator for the Connecticut Digital Newspaper Project, which is run out of the Connecticut State Library. And as you can hear from my background, I am very much immersed in local history, not just at my current position, but in the past as well. So, I agree passionately with the topic of this workshop. There are local topics are immensely interesting and valuable, and there are a plethora of local resources available for students to use. So, just a little bit about Connecticut Digital Newspaper Project, or CDNP, as I often call it. Um, this is a newspaper digitization grant project that's run out of the state library, and it's part of the larger National Digital Newspaper Program, which is run by the Library of Congress and funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities. Basically, there are state partners in 49 states and Puerto Rico who have participated either in the past or presently in NDNP. Usually the state partner is a flagship organization within the state, either a university or state library or state historical society. The grants are awarded in 2-year cycles, and at CDNP, we're currently starting our 5th cycle. To date, we've digitized over 400,000 pages of Connecticut newspapers, which includes roughly 30 titles, probably a little bit more, covering a time period from 1826 to 1948. So in each grant cycle, we select newspapers and years to digitize. And all of those titles that we've digitized in past cycles are listed on our website, and I will show our website in just a moment. We have a number of other resources on our website, which I'll cover as well. And we select titles based on a variety of factors. In our early grant cycles, the Library of Congress has awardees focus on larger daily newspapers that give a broad coverage of the state and things going on. And then once you get past your 3rd grant cycle, LC challenges you to then look at more honed papers, that represent special interests, special topics, underrepresented voices. So when you look at our website and see what we have digitized in the past, you'll see large daily papers in the beginning, and then you'll see us start to focus in on very specific specialized titles in our later cycles. Our title selection is not complete for our current cycle, but once it is, we will announce on our website our new titles to be digitized over the next 2 years, and the library will also put out a press release on those. So our scanned newspapers are submitted to the Library of Congress throughout each 2-year grant cycle, and they load them into their database Chronicling America, and Library of Congress manages that database, and it is free and open to everyone. So the pages from our last cycle are still currently being uploaded. And right now, Library of Congress has over 18 million pages of digitized newspaper there and counting. In addition to the newspapers, they've also got some other resources on their website. They have a recommended topics section, which includes topic guides using newspaper content, and I'll review those when we look at Chronicling America. And they also have a really good help section with FAQ and search tips. And just a heads up, Library of Congress is currently in the process of migrating and updating their website and databases. So as you're navigating through Chronicling America and other Library of Congress pages, you may notice that some pages look differently than others. That's just because some things have been updated and others haven't. So don't be alarmed, you are still there. And before we look at Chronicling America, I just really quickly want to talk about some other resources that the State Library has available. Digital resources that cover a large amount of state history. So the State Library has digital collections and the CT Digital Archive, and this includes materials from the state archives, state government publications, books and journals on Connecticut history. There's also Newspapers of Connecticut, which is another newspaper digitization project that we've done at the State Library in coordination with public libraries in the state and other organizations that hold newspapers. So those, the historic newspapers that have been digitized in that project are also on CTDA, and these are not the same newspapers that will be found on Chronicling America, it's other titles. And they cover a wide variety of topics and years: 19th century anti-slavery papers, Civil War era, temperance newspapers. And then there's also Research at CT, which is a research database available for use with the CT Public Library card. And it's got reference materials, articles, other newspaper databases like the Hartford Courant and New York Times after 1985. All these resources, I am not the expert on them. I'll give you a contact at the State Library who you can get in touch with if you have questions about these. But I am the expert on Chronicling America, though. So what I'm going to do now is give a quick demonstration of Chronicling America. So this is the homepage for Chronicling America. If you just search Chronicling America on Google, it's usually your first hit. So here on the page, on the homepage, you've got a lot of good jumping points to go. So first here, kind of almost at the top of the page, you have a few different search options. And these are, we'll go over those in just a second. I want to talk about some other aspects of the website before we jump into searching. So I can only speak to Connecticut papers that have been uploaded. But if you click that award recipients link, you're going to see everyone who has contributed to Chronicling America since the start of the grant project in the early 2000s. So you'll see the other New England states. New Hampshire is actually the only state who has not contributed, who's not participated in the grant program. Everyone has high hopes of getting them, and they would really like to have all 50 states. But you see Maine is listed here. Massachusetts is joining us this year. Everyone's really excited about that. And you also see what years the institution has participated. So when you see like 2019, that was a 2019 awardee, and their grant cycle ended just now in 2021. And you'll see, like for Connecticut, we're listed as 2021 because we just got awarded another grant. So, and you can click here, it'll take you, this shows you what institution is the awardee, and it takes you to their website. Providence Public Library joined us last year, or excuse me, in 2019, and they also are another awardee this year. We've got Vermont. They're not currently participating anymore, but they've contributed a lot of content. So, this is where you can go see who all the awardees are. And then if you go back to the homepage, you can also get to those some of those other resources that I mentioned, like recommended topics. So this is where they have some topic guides that help you do research on a particular topic in the newspapers here in Chronicling America. So you can do by subject, you can do by date, and you can click any number of any of these. Let me try to find a good Connecticut one. Let's see. I'm not used to looking at it in this way. I usually look by alphabetical list, but that one is not populating. So if you just look up, we'll just do, for the sake of simplicity, we'll look at Queen Victoria. Now, I will say that our Connecticut papers probably, some of our papers do have good international coverage, but we have very few papers that go this far back. So you would not find, but there are other New England states that have papers that go back further than ours. So you see when they have these topic guides, they've got a brief little introduction here. They've got a timeline, and then they've got usually search strategies. So some advice on searching this topic, and then some of the articles that might come up when you do those searches. And they have a lot of guides available their guides are going to reference, the breadth of papers that are in Chronicling America. We also have some of these guides that we've created, which I'll show you in just a moment on our website, that specifically reference the Connecticut papers that we've put into Chronicling America. So just a quick overview of how you search in Chronicling America. So here at the page, you'll see some different search options. Where it says search pages, that's just your basic search. You can choose a state, you can choose a year range, and then you just enter your search terms. There's also the advanced search, which gives you a little bit more flexibility with what search terms you can put in and how you can enter your search terms. You can still select the state. You can also select specific newspapers. And if you're wanting to select more than one state or one newspaper, you're going to need to hold down Control after you select the first one to get multiples. You can also do another year range here. You can also pick specific dates as well. And you can limit your search to only front pages. If you're looking, that's helpful, especially if you're looking for good like imagery, like headlines, things like that. That'll be like super helpful. You can also limit your search to specific pages as well, which helps if you know like certain types of content appeared in a certain spot in the paper. You can also filter by language. I don't know that a lot of the students will need to do that, but in Connecticut, we have put in a number of Italian papers. So that's the only language you would want to use besides English. And then you enter your search terms and you have a couple of options here with any of the words, and you can enter multiple words there. You can say with all of the words or with the phrase. And you can also, if you use this box within the word, with the words within X number of words of each other, what that's going to do is it's going to make sure that all the stuff that all your search terms are close together in searching, and you can choose 5, 10, 50, 100. If you're looking for a name or a title, then I definitely recommend 5 or 10 as your distance. And then the last box here is where you can look at all the digitized newspapers, and you can filter this by, you could look at every paper that has been put into Chronicling America, or you can also filter by state. So if we want to see the Connecticut titles, we would just hit go, and you'll see all the papers that we've digitized. You can go to browse the issues here, which I'll show you in just a second. You'll see the number of issues that we have in a paper and the date range. And where it says more information here is letting you know that there's a title essay available for the paper, which is an essay that we've written about the background and just general information about the newspapers. So say we want to look at the Bridgeport Evening Farmer, we just want to browse, you can hit the browse issues right there, and that's going to take you to this calendar view. You have the option to change the years, and then you would just click whatever day, and that's going to show you all the pages in that issue. And you can go back to browse available issues. You can go to previous, you can go to next. You can also show all the front pages, and that'll show you the front pages of that title. And you click to view an individual page, and you've got some controls here. You can zoom in or out. This little home button is going to undo whatever zooming you've done and take you back to this sizing of the page right here. And this is going to help you toggle the page around to look at the full page view. Here you'll see how many pages are there, and you can go between the pages this way next to images. You can also click this arrow to go to the next page or go back to all pages. You can use these arrows to navigate to the next issue or the previous issue and all issues. And then here, if you hit text, it's going to take you to the OCR'd text of the page, which is the computer generated text from the scan of the page. That can be helpful if the image is particularly difficult to read. Sometimes the text is very small, and even zooming in is not always great. You can click here, and this is going to download a PDF or a JP2. You can also crop use this to zoom in, and then it download wherever you zoomed, it kind of crops that. I will say when they update Chronicling America, I believe that the cropping feature is going to be enhanced. So that'll be nice if you're trying to get good imagery. So let's go. So that's just briefly how one way to click into, if you just want to browse. That's the best way, is going to this all digitized newspapers and then filtering by state and selecting which paper you want. If you just want to do a quick search, you can start here. With certain search terms, the basic search is going to work fine. Sometimes you do need the advanced search. One topic that is very popular, I know, and appears frequently on the Connecticut list of topics are topics that have to do with suffrage. So that's one of those national topics that, there's very much a state connection to. And so it's really, there's plenty of local history resources on suffrage, and you can definitely get a more detailed picture of suffrage by looking at it on the Connecticut level. So you can go at it a couple ways. You could just enter the term suffrage, which you see I searched this a lot. And so see, I just put that in by all states. That gives you a lot of results. So say you just want to look at your state. So you're going to go there and just select Connecticut, search again. Still a good amount, still over 15,000 pages come up. So this is one of those terms where obviously you're going to get a lot. And this is, you can filter your years if you want to focus on 1 year, or you can do a more specific term, like say you want to do a name. So one name in Connecticut that's connected with suffrage is Josephine Bennett. So let's see how many results we get for Josephine. So 46, that's a more manageable number. So with topics like that, the other background research that the students do can really help them come up with a list of search terms to kind of hone in. Certainly there's value in just searching the larger term suffrage, but it's a little bit more manageable if maybe they start with some people or a specific event, or if they know like a certain year to hone in on to browse, because I know it's certainly daunting to have 15,000 pages to look through. So these are all going to be sorted by relevance when you first get in there into your search results, and you can just click the page. And when you click into the page, the highlighted portion of where the search result turned up is still going to be there, and you can zoom in and see your result there. You can go back to your search results, or you can go to the next page that came up in the search results. Either way, and when you go back out to your search results, you typically go back to the first page when you're on the first page. And then once you navigate to the second page, you'll go back out to the second page. So if you use the advanced search, like I said, you have more options, and see it automatically populates with what you did in the basic search, and it put Josephine Bennett's name in this bottom search because like I said, for a name or phrase, something like that, that's going to be really helpful to do it within so many words of each other. And so that's just the basics of searching and chronicling America. You can also do a list view if you prefer. I like the gallery view. I like to see the pages so you can see where your highlights are coming up, where your search terms came in. There are like a couple things that's good to remind the students about when you're searching. These papers are a product of their time. So you should remind the students that terms that we use now for certain events, such as World War II, are not necessarily the way that they would have referred to the war at the time. World War I would have been called the Great War, things like that. So that's again where their background research is really going to come in handy, where they've seen maybe other terminology and how things were referred to. And then they should also, when they're researching women's names, they should remember that there was a long period of time where women were referred to as Mrs. and whatever their husband's name was. So there's that's a good thing to remember and to search that as well. For instance, Katharine Hepburn, not the actress, but her mother, who was also a suffragist, is sometimes referred to in our papers as Mrs. Thomas Hepburn. So that's a good thing to be on the lookout for. Also, alternate spellings. Again, with Katharine Hepburn, she spelled her name with an A in the middle instead of E. So search both spellings, because the newspapers they weren't concerned with spelling somebody's name right. Sometimes they would just go with the most common, or what they thought was the most common spelling. And sometimes to just remind students that the newspapers are going to have different language. They are going to use terminology that is not politically correct anymore, not okay to use. It may be offensive. And, that's an important thing for them to just learn to analyze and look at critically. And it's not saying that it's okay. That's a part of the historical record. And it's just something, that you have to think about when you're doing research. So in addition to Chronicling America, like I said, we also have our project website. And like I said, we've created guides to newspaper content as well that are on Connecticut specific topics, and you can find those here. We also have some resources that we've created for CT Humanities. They're inquiry-based teaching tools. Those are linked here as well. We have our blog, where we publish a variety of posts. We will sometimes focus on specific subjects. Sometimes it's announcements. So a lot of that could help, find topics as well. And then also all the titles that we've digitized are listed here as well. And we put the years, and we also provide links directly to Chronicling America to those. And when you go there, it actually takes you to the page that has the title essay. So like I mentioned, on the right hand side, this is an essay that we've written about this paper that talks about the history, the background, maybe the editorial views. And then you also have the catalog record on the left hand side, which is just going to give you all the pertinent information about the newspaper, who holds it. So let me just go back to my PowerPoint so that I can share the last slide here. So this is our, and I have a handout that I've shared with Rebecca that she can share with everyone, and it'll have all this information. It'll have an overview of what I discussed, as well as our contact information. So like I said, we have our CDNP website where you can find a lot of information, as well as contact info. There's Chronicling America, which is the main place that you're going to be searching for the newspapers. If you have any questions about CDNP or using Chronicling America, you can feel free to reach out to me, and that's my contact information there. And like I said, I am not the expert on State Library, the other digital resources at the State Library. So for questions on those, you can reach out to Anna Newman, who is our CDNP co-director, but also the digital projects manager at the State Library. And her email is there as well, and on the handout that I've shared with Rebecca. So yeah, and the other New England states have contributed a wealth of newspaper pages as well to Chronicling America. So it's definitely worth going in, sorting by state, and seeing what everybody has there. These newspapers report on national events, but they report on a lot of local events as well. So you get a really nice compare and contrast what's happening on the national level. How did that go at the local level? And you also have a lot of local stories. So yeah, and we have large newspapers that we've digitized, but we also have more small, small town newspapers, or newspapers that just were not as large, that have a really unique voice to them. So there's a lot of resources there, and they really provide a new view into the state and into history and different topics. So.
Great. Thanks so much, Nicole. We really appreciate you sharing that. And it's a good reminder for, all of our audience members. I will remember a year someone from Maine did a project on Prudence Crandall, who's Connecticut state heroine. So it's a great resource, and there for all of our states, you can find great material. So thank you for joining us with
Yes,
that.
thank you.
We're going to turn over next to Victoria Hughes, who is the state coordinator for Vermont. And she and I have been working together for a long time now. And Victoria's at the Vermont Historical Society.
Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you, Nicole. I feel pretty comfortable using Chronicling America, but I learned some places that I've never seen on the site and helpful ways to navigate. So thank you for that. I am going to share my screen. All right. I didn't really want to share it this way, but I'm going to share it this way. Okay. All right. So here, I'm going to talk about some Vermont topics and talk about doing research at the Vermont Historical Society. But I did want to point out when I was talking to Rebecca and we were planning this, I thought of a topic that is both a Vermont local topic and a Connecticut local topic from 1798, when our two esteemed representatives fought each other in Congress with fire tongs and a stick. But for debate and diplomacy, maybe not diplomacy this year, but it's a good debate. But it is also the sense that you can find local connections to a lot of different kind of topics. And I have included this on the Vermont topic list before. And like Rebecca said, they have a theme sheet, we have a theme sheet. We do like to encourage students to do local topics. And some of them might not be well-known topics. And so we do put theme sheets together to maybe offer some suggestions or places to look, or new angles on different topics. So I think with a lot of we have websites to in various places that are related to our History Day programs, but you can find links to things like our state theme sheets. And when we send out the PowerPoint as part of this program, you can click on the links and follow them. So in terms of local topics, there are definitely local connections to national topics. And this photograph of California during the Great Depression, it is on the Library of Congress. And it is a great photograph. It does get used a lot. And it's very evocative of the Great Depression. But the Farm Securities Administration and various similar entities that were hiring the WPA, hiring photographers to take photographs. They did it in a lot of states. And so on the Library of Congress website, there is this similar but different photograph of a mother and a child during the Great Depression, but this is the Vermont angle. So maybe instead of using a photograph that gets used a lot in talking about the Great Depression, you maybe look for a local photograph, even if you're not doing a local focus on it, bring in those local connections when you can. And you can find things in local libraries, but also in large libraries like the Library of Congress that have local connections. We do want to encourage going to archives, local research libraries. I know not everybody is open yet. Some are still closed because of COVID. Some have certain restrictions. Some are open by appointment only. And some, like in Vermont, we have a lot of local historical societies that are only open really in the summer, and those might not work well for your history research. But I would recommend trying to reach out to the organizations. As librarians and archivists and educators and historians, we save this information so other people can access it and can enjoy it and can learn from it. And so we like to share what's in our archives and our research libraries, and we like people to be able to access it and find what they're looking for. And there are experts, they're professional librarians, they're archivists who can help you when you look for information. So definitely talk to them, ask them. But one thing, and not all places have this, but some places do, we have a research library, and just to make sure, did that follow the link when I changed to the catalog? Okay. And my example too is with suffrage, because that is a good topic, especially with last year's anniversary. But in our online catalog, full disclosure, we do not have everything in our online catalog. We still have card catalog files in our library where you actually have to look at the little cards to find the information. We are putting things into the card catalog, but online card catalog is one way that you can access information in the library remotely, even though this does not lead to digitized information. But when we look at the Vermont Equal Suffrage Association papers, the card catalog or the online catalog record has some information that tells us a little bit about the collection. And if we're looking at suffrage in Vermont, this might be a good collection to look at. It's 3 boxes full of papers, which is a good collection of papers, but also some are like 15 boxes, and that's a lot to look through, but 3 boxes is somewhat approachable. But this still doesn't give us a lot of information, but oftentimes there are finding aids. And a finding aid is a way to give additional information and goes down to showing like what's in each box and what is more information about the collection. So if you're doing this kind of research, not at the research library, you can maybe see if this collection is going to be useful with your research even before you get to the library. And when you ask librarians for help, they're going to be looking at these finding aids too. And it also means that you don't have to look through 3 entire boxes of papers to look for something, but then you can narrow down. Like if you're just focusing in 1910, then you can look in folder number 7, and there's some information from 1910 in that folder. So if you're going to a research library, there may be work that you can do before you get there. Let me go move this and go back to the right place. But one thing, so in those 3 boxes of papers, we haven't digitized those collections. We've digitized a few things related to the suffrage anniversary last year, but a lot of places held so many more records than have been digitized. And so that is one reason to go to a research library and get to see different sources that have not been digitized. Another place, and this is another record that is the Vermont Women's Suffrage Association. It's their annual reports, which might sound like it's a good place to look for information. But here, none of these have been digitized and none are linked in this place, or I will say, we have not digitized any of our copies, but you can see that we do have copies for a number of years. So sometimes this is helpful to know if you're going to go to a library, but if you're not able to go to that library, or if a library is closed at this time, it might not be helpful in your research. But I know I've taken calls from students before who have an idea of what they're looking for, and I've scanned some records for them and emailed them those records. It's not quite the same as them coming in and looking at all of them and making choices, but then they can make choices from a few things that have been scanned. So there may be a way that a librarian can help you and send some materials to you. And we charge adults for this kind of record research, but for students, we love giving information to students and making it available. So if we're able to, we're very happy to help students doing research. But in part, because of the suffrage anniversary last year, the centennial, there are a lot of things that are digitized. And this may be another way to find resources. So still doing local history, but things that are available digitally. It's not everything. And like this record here, it's actually something that's going to go into a newspaper. We've scanned it internally, but it is not available publicly in a digital format. we're working on getting more things digitized and available publicly, but we're not there quite yet. But here are some different things, and I'm not going to show all of these links, but this is actually a digitized radio program from the 1980s, which is a secondary source, but it is a good beginning piece of information about Vermont women getting the vote. There are exhibits that were done last year. There are articles that are done in journals, and all of these things are available. Some you can find if you just start searching. You can start with a Google search, or like go to the Vermont Historical Society website and then look up suffrage. The Vermont Suffrage Centennial Alliance website has a bibliography, which is going to give some good links. But there are places like this is the digital, or no, this is the digital collections from the University of Vermont, where they have a number of items that they scanned last year. And they have sort of small chunks of collections. They have a really good Civil War collection online. They have women's suffrage online. They have maple syrup collections online. So they do have sort of pockets of small collections that are, some of them are just from the University of Vermont. Some of them are also Vermont Historical Society resources. But this is where your state coordinator or another local organization might be able to give you some hints of where to look. So I often tell students to look at the University of Vermont Center for Digital Initiatives website if they're looking for certain information. And they have scanned one of the annual reports of the Suffrage Association. And so that can be flipped through like you're reading in the archives, but you don't actually have to come to the archives. And so even though we haven't digitized one of our collections, they have digitized one of their collections. And just one thing to remember when we have collections, not everything has ended up in every place. So some places have some resources, other places have others. And there's some things that you might be looking for that weren't saved or are saved, but in not great condition. And so sometimes it does take a lot of work to find what you're looking for, but that is where librarians and archivists can also help you. And then also going back to what Nicole was talking about, looking for a local, this is a Vermont newspaper about suffrage in Vermont. And so finding that on Chronicling America. So there are different places to look for local history. Come to a research library if you can, but also if you can't, don't worry that there are other places online that you can find some of what you're looking for. The other piece, and I do see this sometimes with local history topics, students do great work on the local information, but it does also help when you have a local history topic to know what's the larger historical context, because you can look at what was happening with suffrage in Vermont, but what was happening elsewhere, what was happening in Connecticut, what was happening in surrounding states. And then there are some larger collections that have local resources or can be used as local resources, but are not local entities. So the Gilder Lerman Library, they have this great resource, and they've actually turned it into an interactive resource where you can use this primary source as a background, but you can also click on the different states and see what was happening. Because sometimes, especially when students get to judging at the national level, the judges want to know, well, what else was happening in other places? And if you've only examined your local history, you might not be able to answer what was happening elsewhere. And so I know you don't have a lot of words and spaces and projects to do local and the larger historical context, but knowing what's happening elsewhere is helpful. And so these are some other places to look where you can find local resources, or you can find that larger historical context. But places like the National Archives, they have Vermont resources, they have Connecticut resources, they have national resources. So looking at places like that, and then other places like the New York Public Library, they have a great digital collection that's available and may have some local resources that are available. And so I'm just going to skip to the end on this slide, but we do have a link on our website that has places for finding mostly primary sources, but where you can look at broad collections, but also where you can look at Vermont collections to help students do some of this research of things that are available online. So I'm going to go back to, these are some of our other New England colleagues, and we all have a History Day pages. However we name our contest, our programs. And so we are happy to help you find resources, help you find places to look, both for local topics, but also for other information that you might be seeking. So I am going to, because these are all links and we will send this out with these links, but some of our colleagues want to share a little bit of what they have at their states. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I will pass it. Kate, do you want to go next? And
sure. Thank you both, the three of you, so much for this wonderful presentation. And I'm already hearing like things that are relevant to Massachusetts history, even though they've been presented through this lens of, Vermont and Connecticut. There's so many great materials. So Massachusetts, I'm going to, before I do that, I just want to kind of echo this theme of being able to find interesting local stories gives you access to so much, right? It's, students are digging into something that can feel really relevant to them. And I would also encourage that if you want your students to think about local stories, not only do they think about what sort of resources are around them, but if they look around their own community, like we talked about with the sort of family stories, and just start asking questions, that they can often stumble across something really interesting. So what's that monument in our town square, and where is that from? Where does the name of our school come from? Who is it named after? Are there any sort of arguments that have been taking place in like town councils or things that have a root in a different history? There was one project that was done a few years ago where the students ended up doing a project looking at the Woburn Cancer Cluster, where there was a community in Massachusetts and there was a factory nearby that had been poisoning the groundwater. And they ended up doing interviews with the lawyer who had been involved, with some of the parents who sued because their children had gotten sick. They had local TV coverage and maps, and they were able to do that because they were asking questions about kind of what happened in my town and who should I talk to, right? Going to the local community center and finding out, who knows the best stories. So there's lots of things that you don't have to necessarily go to a big city to find. That being said, I do want to talk about some of the resources that we have here on our website and some of the ways that you can find these archives and collections. And this is both for Massachusetts students, but also really for anyone to use. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly. And there are so many different things that we could talk about in Massachusetts, but we have just a few of them. I'm going to link to sort of our research link page. So on this page, you see we've got kind of digital tips. We suggest that you do things like talk to your school or town library, ask your librarians for advice. A lot of the time, local colleges and universities will let you use their archives if you give them a call or an email and ask in advance. Historical societies, museums, and historic sites are all great places to ask questions as well. So the first thing I want to touch on, I work at the Massachusetts Historical Society, which is the host for National History Day in Massachusetts. We have a ton of primary sources on US history and on Massachusetts in particular. And one of the things that we have is a Massachusetts or a theme page for every year. So this is available and has things that are relevant to Massachusetts and beyond, but we explore what are some of the questions that might get you started and thinking about the theme for the year. How do we explore the archive, and what are some of the questions you want to ask when you're looking at archival materials, like what's here, who wrote it, what's missing, why might it be missing? And then a whole bunch of different topics with links to some of those materials. Now, this is an MHS archive specifically, but we're actually currently working on a Massachusetts theme page, which is going to just be sort of across the board. If you're interested in military history or civil rights history or these other things, what are some sample topics and links? So that's going to be coming in the next week or two as soon as we can get up on the website. I also highly, highly recommend your local public library. In Massachusetts, we have the Boston Public Library, which a lot of Massachusetts residents don't know. It's free for anyone in Massachusetts to use, even if you don't live in Boston. And one of the things that you can do is you can access article databases like JSTOR, which is an article database where you can get a lot of secondary sources from great scholars. It can be really useful. So just clicking here, you can see in the online resources, we've got, say, for history and political science. You can look down here and have magazines, journals, and newspapers, including the Boston Globe going back decades. So, for example, if you wanted to do a project on the Boston molasses flood, which if you haven't heard of it, in the early 1900s, there was a disaster at a factory that was making industrial molasses where the tank collapsed and ended up killing a number of people in the Boston North End. And you can go in here and look at the old newspapers from then and find these incredible headlines. So really, really worth exploring. You'll also find access to things like, the Gale scholarly resources, and a whole bunch of other places to find secondary sources. And I'm betting that other states have the same sorts of things. So really go and ask, see what they have at your state library and how you can access it. In Massachusetts, we also have a number of partners that have created theme pages, sort of like the one that I just showed you for the Massachusetts Historical Society and what you saw with Vermont and Connecticut. And they've made those for History Day students across the country. So for example, if you go to the Boston Athenaeum, they have a page where you can see some of the different topics that they have. They have materials that are relevant to this year's theme, and they also have links so that you can contact their librarians and ask questions. At the Historical Society where I work, I actually have one colleague in the library who specifically takes History Day questions and will help History Day kids find what they need. So anytime you have a question, go to the library chat. They can chat with them online, send them an email, give them a call. They love helping out student researchers. So you'll find a whole bunch of other ones that are related to Massachusetts history, although sometimes they also go beyond Massachusetts history. So for example, at the Weiner Family Jewish Heritage Center, you can find a whole bunch of examples of collections that are related to, for example, diplomacy and debate around Israel, Palestine, and the Middle East. So if you were looking for some local connections and resources that would help connect you to worldwide history, you can do that in places like this as well. Then on our page, we have a list of just a few highlighted libraries and archives that have particularly good digital resources, since a lot of us are working in a digital world right now. So you can see, for example, at Harvard's Countways Library Center for the History of Medicine, if you're doing something related to medical history, you could go and check out the links here or head to their Ask Countway to talk to a librarian. You'll also find the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum, the Center for Lowell History, all sorts of different things. Then here too, we have some other collections like National Libraries and Archives. I'm about to add Chronicling America, the newspapers, because that's an excellent link. Things related to world history, and just a few tastes of archives on specific topics, such as the Digital Transgender Archives, medieval digital resources, that sort of thing. And then last but not least, we have just a sampling of the many different museums and historical societies and sites around Massachusetts. So I mentioned, for example, the Countway Library before for medical history. You could also check out the Clara Barton Birthplace Museum if you wanted to find something that was really local and go visit their site and see what kinds of papers they have. And then last but not least, also a very short list of some national and international museums that might be of interest as well. So this is just a taste of what we have here in Massachusetts, but I hope it gives some ideas about not only the places that you can specifically go that we have links to, but the types of places that you could check out or that your students could check out when they're starting their search.
Great, thank you, Kate. Looks like John had to sneak out, but he is here to represent National History Day in Maine, and they too have a website that has different resources that are in Maine, different local collections, and so really the state websites are a great place to also get information and talk to your state coordinator, who is happy to provide helpful information. So, and on our PowerPoint, we do have Rhode Island linked. The coordinator from Rhode Island is not able to join us today because they are doing their own local history workshop about Rhode Island history, but they have resources, as does New Hampshire. So just to represent our remaining New England states. And Rebecca, did you want to say a few things about the Connecticut resources?
Sure. I mean, we have everything linked in the PowerPoint. We will send it out, but we do have a list of Connecticut topics. And as I mentioned in my presentation, we have links to some of our colleagues who've created their pages as well. And it's just been great listening to everyone's presentation, because I think even Kate, as you were talking about Massachusetts resources, everyone's presentation made me think a little bit more about things that you can find locally. And I think it's been really great to emphasize all of the great stories. You can choose to do a project that will encompass 2 different states, as Victoria shared. Perhaps not our state's finest moments, but that's okay. But I just want to thank everyone for sharing their time with us, because there are some great things that you can explore and learn more about the place where you live.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. I'm going to stop the recording so we can share this with everyone who wasn't able to join us tonight, but can watch it online.